Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious? Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for May 6, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brennan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this conversation. It is certainly going to be a doozy. So buckle up. It's going to be a fun little ride here.
Maybe.
We talk about Another Simple Favor. What's really interesting about this film, Brendan, is that I told my wife about it, who really liked the first Simple Favor film that came out in 2018.
Yeah.
So I proposed that, hey, do you want to watch this with me? It's on Prime Video. We don't have to go anywhere. We can watch this in the comfort of our own home.
Yeah.
And my wife's response to that wasn't, oh, I love the first film. Yes, let's watch this one. That was not her response. Her response, presciently, was, oh, it went straight to streaming? That can't be a good sign.
For a second, I thought you were going to say her reaction was, oh, what was that first movie again?
Oh, no, she remembered the first film, and she remembers liking it quite a lot, as many people seemed to really like that first Simple Favor movie.
I'm one of them. I actually saw that again sometime last year when it was on, I think it was on Netflix or something like that, but I watched it with my wife, and I had a lot of fun with it the second go around. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't really revisited the film since 2018. I was rather lukewarm on it at best. I thought it was fine. It was okay. I had fun with it, but I don't think it was nearly as extraordinary as others make it out to be, but I'm glad that people are having a heyday with it.
It does feel very much like Paul Feig is trying to make his own Lifetime movie of the week, and it seems very self-aware in that agenda, which is, I think, why it is so much fun for so many people, and I think that does give that first film a little bit of charm.
For sure.
Given that whole approach.
Well, and it also came out during that era where Gone Girl comes out and it is this massive success, and then Hollywood tried to reproduce that formula in a lot of other movies, and no one else could really capture that lightning in a bottle.
In a way, it was kind of a more sophisticated, if that's the right word, maybe a more sophisticated and classy version of that Will Ferrell, Kristen Wiig led comedy called, I think it was like Deadly Adoption or something like that, which was basically poking fun more literally at the Lifetime movie of the week formula. Yeah. And Paul Feig kind of does it in a more Fincher-like way, I guess, kind of splitting the difference in a way, which makes it a really interesting product. I think that's maybe why people latched onto it. But you're right, it was certainly kind of a thing for a little while.
It was a thing for a little while.
Those airplane movies,
it was,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, not trying to rain on anyone's parade. People seem to really like it. If you're one of those, I'm glad that you did like it. I didn't hate the movie by any stretch of the imagination. I thought it was fine.
Sure.
Thought it was perfectly okay for what it was. It was no Gone Girl. I'll just put it that way. However,
I mean, Fincher's Fincher.
Yeah, exactly. All these years later, we're getting a sequel to that film. And I thought it was quite hilarious that my wife was like, it's going straight to Prime Video. That can't be a good sign. And it was a little funny because my rebuttal to that was, there's movies that go to streaming. That doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. Roma went straight to Netflix, for example. We've seen great films that were, for whatever reason, they were bought by the streaming services. And so they land on these streaming services, but they're good movies. They're good movies. Are a lot of films that go straight to streaming bad? Yes. Yes. But
we've talked about this, right? JD, started to cut you off because I know you're making a point. there's a big difference between a streaming movie and a movie that is going to stream.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I was at a crossroads with another simple favor because, again, a lot of people really liked that first film. It's directed once again by Paul Feig, and you have the same cast coming back: Anna Kendrick, Blake Lively, Henry Golding, among others that are additional elements to this film. So in my mind, and I know that this premiered at South by earlier in the year, and it got some decent reactions from South by.
Yeah.
So despite it launching on Prime Video and not going to theaters, I was a little conflicted. I didn't have the pessimism that my wife did, that, oh, just because it's going straight to streaming, that means that it's bad automatically. But maybe she was onto something. Maybe my wife should be here instead of me.
Before we get into our thoughts, I am curious what your wife thought of this one. Maybe what she thinks of it could be like our prelude to bring our thoughts into it then.
She didn't love it. Okay. I don't know if she's going to be as hard on it as maybe we'll be in this conversation. I don't know. She said that it was okay. It was okay. Didn't love it. It was fine. It was okay. It certainly didn't, and we stayed up a little late to watch this, right? Because obviously we can't really watch movies until the kids go to bed. So, you get the oldest one to bed finally. It's 9:30 or even later by the time he falls asleep. So
close to 10. So then you have a 2-hour movie. Yeah. So then you're going to bed past midnight because of a movie like this.
Exactly. So in her mind, it wasn't worth staying up that late to watch the film. It didn't really quite equate to that.
Probably not so much a simple favor anymore. A bit more of a complicated one.
Yeah. But she said it was okay. It was okay. But I think her approach to the film, while she was certainly more pessimistic than I was, but maybe I should have listened. Maybe,
I don't know.
Maybe
sometimes it's easy for us to get caught up in the early festival hype, even when we're not there. Sometimes a movie can really surprise people, and that can really, I guess, boost the anticipation and maybe some of the earlier reactions, just given the fact that maybe no one was really expecting anything out of this, and the fact that for most people it didn't suck. I guess maybe that sort of skewed the positivity a little bit up front. I don't know. In a way, I think we're playing our cards a little bit early as to how we feel about it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we could just go ahead and get into it because there's really no reason to hold us back. And we've already kind of laid out how we feel about the first film.
Yeah.
I would be curious to revisit that first one again, knowing what it is. I do think, like you, I could have more fun with it on a second go around. Yeah. I think that's very plausible for sure. So with all of that laid out, let's go ahead and jump into another simple favor. As we noted, it is once again directed by Paul Feig. It stars Anna Kendrick, Blake Lively, Elizabeth Perkins, Andrew Rannellis, Henry Golden, Allison Janney is in this, Alina Sophia Ricci, and others that come and go throughout the film. If you're not familiar with another simple favor, Stephanie Smothers and Emily Nelson reunite on the island of Capri, Italy, for Emily's extravagant wedding to a rich Italian businessman, which is interrupted by murder and betrayal. Okay.
You're becoming such a thespian with how you read these plots and
you gotta have fun with it. Gotta have fun with it, especially for a movie like this. You gotta
try to find the fun. Yeah. Where was that?
Yeah. Brendan, another simple favor. What say you?
Was not a fan. I was not a fan, unfortunately. And I think the ingredients were there. It's definitely something that's going for a more heightened version of the first film. And like I said, that first film, it's certainly not something I would say I love, but I've seen it twice and I did like it more on that second go round. And I think it's because of its self-awareness, like I mentioned earlier in this conversation. And it does something that I think is pretty tricky. It really seems that even despite its uh, self-awareness and its overly comical energy that's kind of poking fun at certain things, it still feels like it has like this cryptic earnestness for its characters. I feel like Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively, especially, they actually like the characters that they're playing in that movie.
Yeah.
And that does go a long way. Whether we're supposed to like them as characters or not is a very different thing, but they seem to be genuinely having fun, which I didn't sense here in this sequel. It really does feel more obligatory. There's a very different dynamic that is very try hard here, which normally doesn't work for me already. It just makes the film feel more desperate when compared to the more natural execution of that first film. And when something is so desperate and really trying for an even more heightened level of personality, it starts to double back on itself. And it just makes it even that much more passionless by comparison. And that really is why this didn't work for me. It just it reeks of such desperation. And when it gets to its final reveals in the back half, it starts to resolve itself way too cleanly for me, for a movie that I think actually should be much messier. And it really seems to be more interested in that messiness, but it really takes I don't want to say it takes itself too seriously, but it's too cleanly told to us. And I think the movie needed to be a bit gawkier in order to wrap things up a bit more comedically. And I just think the personality is trying too hard and it just reverts on itself. And I didn't have fun with this one. This really reminded me a lot of how Adam Sandler and his team at Happy Madison make their movies. They just go shoot on location, have a vacation together, and make a movie simultaneously. That's kind of what this felt. So biggest praise I could say for the movie, it's mostly shot in Italy and you can kind of see it. So I give it credit for that it doesn't all feel like it was on some type of soundstage somewhere. So there is maybe a tangibility in the location scouting and things like that. But for the most part, this didn't work for me.
Yeah, I thought this was quite bad. I don't think it's very good. And I agree with a lot of what you're saying, especially when you're talking about how obligatory this feels. That's ultimately what this film renders, is that Amazon or whoever was producing this simply saw a cash grab. Although, again, ironically, this isn't going to theaters. It's going straight to Prime Video. I'm not exactly sure what the inception of this film was or who originated it, but this felt obligatory. A sequel, sure, let's go ahead and do it. It's a free vacation to Italy. We'll make a movie while we're there. And no one put any sort of effort into this whatsoever. And it certainly starts with a rather mundane script that is awfully contrived and lazy. And look, I understand that this isn't trying to be anything other than a trashy airport novel, as we already established, much like the first film. But I do think that tone management here is a big, big problem. Because on one hand, there are a lot of scenes here, especially in the first half of the film, where it is tacky and intentionally playing into that cheese that we love from these films. And at times that is compelling, particularly when it's Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively verbally sparring with each other. That's when this film is at its most fun.
The pool scene. The pool scene when it's just the two of them is the best scene in the movie.
It's great. It's great. I love that. Or them, they're near the edge of the cliff where it's just the two of them going toe to toe with each other. That I think is really great. When it's just the two of them and they're able to bounce off of each other That's where this film is really great. I mean, ironically, if you just stripped this film down and you got rid of all of its plotting and it was just a Richard Linklater walk and talkie kind of movie, it could have been effective because they are great performers, and as these two characters, there is a lot of charm to be had when they're simply laying, thickly the tackiness that comes with the dialogue between them. So I did enjoy those moments, but it's also a murder mystery.
Yeah.
And as a result of the mechanics and the plotting of it functioning as a murder mystery, while again, there are layers to it that amp up the tackiness and the trashiness of the film, simultaneously, there are elements where it gets a little bit more dire. And from a tone management perspective, I think that is quite negligible here. It's not good.
It's kind of annoying, honestly.
It's really bad, especially when you get to the back half of the film, where once again there are these really insane reveals that I don't think work really well. It's kind of difficult to articulate why without getting into spoilers, but I will say I think part of it is tone management, because again, when we're introducing this mystery character that enters into the film, the film's tone changes quite drastically. And I also don't think it works performatively. I don't think the performance can sell it. And that's also a big problem here.
The best attribute of the film, and when it is working performatively, is when it's just Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively as these two characters. The Linklater-esque vibe of it that you're talking about. I would totally be down to see before Simple Favor, whatever the hell you want to call it. Sure. I would love to see that trilogy, I guess. But given the nature of where this particular story feels like it needs to go and how detailed that it is, it then strips away this movie's greatest strength. And that is the dynamic between these two characters. Because the story here basically forces them to be separated from the majority of this movie. Yeah. And I love Anna Kendrick. I think she's a really talented actress and also a very talented director, as we saw last year with Woman of the Hour. So she has a bright future ahead of her, but I don't know how she's being directed in this movie. Those scenes in the back half, it almost feels like she's playing a completely new character. There's very little consistency between the Stephanie we get while she's with Emily / Hope, or the Stephanie we get when she's on her own playing this detective-like role that she's forced into, essentially. And there's no synergy there whatsoever. And honestly, I think it's emblematic of the entire film. There's really no synergy between those two halves, if you will. This kind of is a tale of two halves in many ways. I don't really think one half is that much better than the other, but it's really unfortunate that the details of this murder mystery become so suffocating that it ends up robbing this movie's greatest attribute. And that is just simply seeing Blake and Anna on screen together, sparring with one another, like that pool scene I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately where this film is suffocated, is trying to balance the campiness of the performances and Stephanie and Emily and them verbally going back and forth throughout the film, trying to figure out the chess play and how each character is maneuvering in terms of the game and who's ahead of who in terms of the movement. That element, I think, is compelling enough. That's fine. But then you include the Henry Golding character who comes back, who is the ex-husband of Emily. So he's contrived to be into this film for really no reason whatsoever. Yeah. Then you have to include the Allison Janney character, who is Aunt Linda in this film, and she ends up having a pivotal role in the back half of the film. and they include the mob for some reason. The Italian mob has a big
The Italian
here.
mom, yeah, not just Emily's mom, but the Italian mom. There are multiple characters here.
Yeah, well, and the mob is what I was trying to say.
Oh, mob!
there,
I thought you said mom. Sorry, I thought you
Yeah.
meant mother. Sorry, I misheard you.
The
there.
Italian mom is there as well, but she's
mom
part
and
of the
mob
mob. And so like you have all of these elements from a plotting perspective that are trying to weave themselves into the Stephanie Emily dynamic, and it's messy, and I understand that messiness is at the DNA of an airport trashy film like this, but I just find it banal in execution. Like I don't, it's very dull. And again, I think it also goes back to what you said in your opening thoughts. It's very passionless.
Yeah.
When it can be messy, but if it has an energy to it, if there's kineticism to it, then that's where the fun comes in. That's where it becomes diverting. That's what makes Gone Girl really great, because Fincher is able to make that messiness really fun, and the characters are sparkling, and he's also able to massage that narrative to even have some sort of thematic heft to it, which Paul Feig attempts to do with the first Simple Favor, and while he's not successful fully, I would argue it's like that film is Citizen Kane compared to
It's a
this.
much more interesting movie, and that movie has that messiness that we want out of an airport novel story like this. While it does, it does resolve itself in a way where it does tie up each loose end that it needs to, so there is a neatness to it, but there is still kind of a sloppy energy in getting to that neatness, which this movie does not have, and I think it needs more of that given the grander nature of the story. Like I said in my opening thoughts, this starts to resolve itself way too cleanly. There's too much of a smoothness in how these reveals are handled and who's playing who and how this all works out. It almost makes it too anticlimactic for its own good, and given the passionless energy of it, that adds to the anticlimactic nature for us especially. These are the worst types of movies to talk about on the podcast, JD, because they're actually the hardest movies for us to talk about. They really are. Like I'm sitting here thinking I don't have much else to say. I really don't.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unfortunate that a movie is leaving us this passionless about talking about movies, which is not what we want to be in.
No, I mean, I agree with you. There really isn't much to divulge here. And I think it simply comes down to the vacuous approach to this film from a directional perspective, certainly from a writing perspective, but even performatively. Anna Kendrick, I think, is doing a fine job. I think she's okay. But again, the material isn't doing anything to amplify the performance. Same with Blake Lively. Again, I think when it's just Stephanie and Emily, they're really great. That's when they're easily having the most fun here. But when
doesn't feel scripted when it's just the two of them.
Yeah, when it's Anna Kendrick stuck in a hotel room for what feels like 25 minutes trying to figure out how to get out, I just don't understand what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the inclusion of this FBI character, and how that crystallizes is perplexing to me in terms of what is the value of having that character here.
Which,
unless the answer to that is, oh, look at how fun the conversations are between her and Stephanie. But I don't think the performance
that's not there,
or the writing is able to deliver on that comedy.
No, it's there to subvert an expectation. I don't necessarily mind the way that character's arc crystallizes, but it feels like it amounts to nothing because there is nothing in between the plot lines to get us intrigued by that. And that's really the biggest problem. It's more interested in how that character is integrated as a plot mechanic as opposed to another dynamic.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't think that the comedy behind the character is all that great. Also, the character is underutilized. She's in the film for 2 scenes before her arc crystallizes, And I agree with you. I don't have an issue with the subversion of it as much as it is what is the, like, how does that elevate, maybe that's the wrong word in this context, but how does that complement everything else that's going on? And I just don't think it does. It really does become a plotting thing in the end, which I don't find that really interesting, especially because it does bring a cogency to this film, as you're talking about. Once that character crystallizes, we know who's behind it and how all of that is unveiled. It comes about like without much conflict, I guess. And then even how it all kind of comes to a head at the end of the film. What is, like, that scene to me in execution? It's just confounding. It's perplexing to me.
I was never thrilled. I was never curious about where it was going to go, which is something I can't say about that first film. Given the way that first film ends, that, for lack of a better term, that three-way confrontation between Henry Golding, Blake Lively, and Anna Kendrick, and how it all plays out in their house and the back and forth that's going on there. Whether you find it predictable or not is kind of beside the point. I was invested in what was going on behind the plot mechanics, which this movie is only interested in those plot mechanics. And I didn't care what was going to happen afterwards. Allison Janney is another talented actress, but again, the character is simply treated as a plot point in order to get to that final cliff scene. And it's unfortunate that you have these talented people that are just not given the space to push past the MacGuffin-like territory that they're navigating within. I'd say really the only one here that I think is at least doing something interesting is Elizabeth Perkins. And even she's playing a character that I think we saw in the first movie, but in the first movie it was played by Jean Smart. So of course they have to make a plastic surgery joke to explain why it's a different actress, which is honestly kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. It's just way too easy. But
what they do.
But I feel like, and maybe it's just the material. I feel like what she's given, Elizabeth Perkins specifically, isn't as relegated to plot. So she just has more to play with. There's more for her to improvise and be a little bit weird and quirky with her role. And I think that's why she ultimately stood out for me.
Well, and that speaks to the tone management of the film as well that I have a problem with. And again, this is where it gets tricky because I don't want to give it away in case anyone listening hasn't seen the film yet.
If they're interested
I imagine
in it,
if you're listening, you have. But with Allison Janney, there is a reveal that she is not working alone. I'll just put it that way. If you've seen the film, you know exactly what I'm talking about anyway. There is a juxtaposition between what I'll label this mystery character working with Aunt Linda. There is a juxtaposition between that character and Margaret, Elizabeth Perkins. The way she plays into the weirdness of that character, the mental instability of it, there is a diverting quality to it. She is having a lot of fun, and the film isn't utilizing that instability in a dire way. The mystery character, on the other hand, it is the total antithesis. And that's where I think the performance is problematic because it is used in a way, and to be fair to the performer, it might be how they are being directed, or it could be the material, and that's what is being asked of them. But it just comes off as an extremely trite, arguably problematic version of mental instability in a film that is supposed to be this really fun, trashy airport novel kind of thing. And it's jarring. It's really, really jarring. And that character has a significant role in the back half, which is why for me, as I do think this is a film, a tale of two halves for me. I think the first half is watchable. It's not great, but it's watchable. The back half, I think, is feckless. I don't
I
think it works at all.
yeah. Yeah.
And
I
a lot of it comes down to the tone management and the storytelling here.
Yeah, I wasn't really engaged by the first half personally, but even I would say I think it is certainly a better constructed half when compared to the second half. In a way, it really does kind of feel like that they're adapting some other random airport novel and then like like morphing it into another simple favor in a
Yeah.
way. It just like there's something that just seems off in the connectivity between how it relates to this franchise and how it relates to this new in particular story that it's telling. And you know, I at least give it credit for maybe trying to have some things on its mind with relation to influencer culture and like America's obsession with true crime. But it's hard for me to feel any sort of connectivity to that thematic idea when Red Rooms did it so well just a year ago, and it just makes it even more feckless when you think about how this movie is maybe trying to have some provocative ideas on its mind, but you can't help but compare it to other movies that did it so much better.
Well, and all of that is hollow here, right? I
Yeah,
mean, Stephanie
it's a
has
mere idea.
those. Yeah, exactly. I mean, she has those haunting images that are thrown onto the screen from time to time. But by the time we get answers as to her involvement with all of that, it like the film has nothing to say. It's just there to fill up screen time. That's all it's doing.
Hmm.
And again, it just adds to the choices this film makes that are often frivolous and they're just to have a movie. That's all that it
Yeah,
is.
I'll
And
yeah.
I personally, I don't find that interesting.
I'll say this after rewatching that first film, A Simple Favor. I I think I revisited it sometime in 2024 when we knew that a sequel was coming. We didn't really know what it would be about. I don't even think we knew that it would be called Another Simple Favor. It just had some working title as a sequel. But revisiting that film, knowing that a sequel was coming, it actually made me kind of excited for a sequel. I
Yeah.
was looking forward to seeing what would happen next. Now, seeing this one, if a third one gets announced, my reaction is, I'm good. I think I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really the last thing I can say about this movie, honestly.
I'm with you. Like I'm kind of out at this point.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because I do think the, like the performers, Paul Feig, like there's a lot to admire from the artistry of everyone involved here. But
Mhm.
in this specific context, it's just not working.
It's
Not
overwritten
working.
too. There are more screenwriters on
Yeah.
this one than before, and that definitely does show in the final product.
Yeah. So my wife was correct. She was right to be pessimistic about this film going straight to streaming. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's good at all. Uh,
Yeah, one of the co-writers on Another Simple Favor. I don't know how to pronounce the screenwriter's name. Her name is Leta Calagris. She was apparently the main writer on Shutter Island, which I know a lot of people have a lot of respect for. But she was also a writer on Terminator Genesis, Alexander, that really bad Oliver Stone movie, Alita Battle Angel. So apparently they tend to tap into people like this that are more geared towards plot mechanics. And sometimes movies can ultimately just be overwritten. And I think this one is.
yeah. Yeah. This one is absolutely overwritten. It's a movie that involves the FBI. It involves the Italian mob. It involves an ex-husband who is drunk and just spouting off a bunch of nonsense dialogue. You
Mhm.
know, if you're going to have Henry Golding in your film, at least let him be his charming self. And this film goes out of its way to strip that from him. Like that's his best asset as a performer. What are you doing?
Yeah. He's not
It just
playing the
makes
same
no
character.
sense.
He might as well be playing a new character, which is not a bad thing,
Yeah.
but you need to contextualize that. You need to give a reason for it.
Yeah. And give him space to do something with that. This film doesn't do that at all. Same thing with Allison Janney, as we noted earlier. Like there's
Yeah.
just there's a lot going on here and it just amounts to nothing, which is ultimately, one of its
Yeah,
biggest
that's the
sins.
thing. Sometimes the harder you try, sometimes the more you write, the harder you direct, the more desperate you are to give it some type of personality, it just has an adverse effect. It just starts to limit that personality even more the more you try. And I think this is a perfect example of that.
I agree. I mean, generally less is more, but I understand what this film is trying to tap into genre wise. And those kind of movies tend to have a lot going on, but it's knowing how to, and again, I hate to keep bringing up Fincher as the quintessential example, but you look at Gone Girl as, because there's a lot going on in that film, but everything is done cogently, despite how messy it might be perceived on the surface. There's precision to everything he's doing in that film.
Yeah.
And it's really fun as a result, but also there's great thematic depth, great character depth, great artistry on display there. So you can take an airport trashy novel and do something sophisticated with it. I'm not saying that's what Paul Feig should have done or that's what he was trying to do. I'm not saying that at all. But there is a middle ground between having a formula that makes sense of the material and having just making an entertaining movie.
Yeah.
And this, I think, fails quite miserably.
Yeah, I didn't find it entertaining either.
I will say my kind of last thought on all of this, just looking at Paul Feig as a director, it is quite astonishing how his career is shaping up. It seems to me, maybe much like the movie itself, that we have a tale of two halves here, because I do think his run from Bridesmaids to that first Simple Favor is pretty good. It's pretty good. I like all of those movies to one degree or another. Again, I'm less on A Simple Favor than many others, but especially in hindsight, given another Simple Favor, that one is Citizen Kane comparatively. But like Spy, The Heat, Ghostbusters, I like those movies. Bridesmaids is really great. Everything post A Simple Favor, though, has left a lot to be desired. And I'm left here wondering what to make of him as a filmmaker. I don't know what to expect from him going forward now.
Kind of realizing now he's just not really my guy. He's just not really for me. I do like that first A Simple Favor, like I mentioned, and I think Spy is fun. The Heat is also pretty fun. I'm actually not a big Bridesmaids fan, so that kind of puts me in a bit of a minority there. But I like some of those other films when he's actually divulging a bit more into action comedy. I actually think that's his greatest strength. I think his two best movies are probably The Heat and Spy, if I'm being honest. Those are my two favorites.
Yeah.
But I think he actually does play well with genre, which is why I did like that first A Simple Favor and why it's kind of astonishing that I didn't go for this one. Because in a way, given the films of his that I seem to like the most, when he plays with genre, that usually leads to what I think are his best results. And this is not in that company at all. Even though I think theoretically it should be, it's just not.
Well, I want to know what changed then, because it's not as if Another Simple Favor didn't offer ample opportunity. There was plenty of opportunity for him to play with the genre here, and he simply refused.
Well, that's I don't know. It could be the obligatory nature of it. Is this something he even wanted to do? Because at least with films like Spy and The Heat, it's kind of like what I said earlier with A Simple Favor, that first film. You don't have to like the people you're watching on screen, but you at least have to feel like those on screen like what they're doing for this particular movie. And those movies, especially with Paul Feig behind the camera, there's an energy to those movies that feel like that they're being made by people that actually care about the material that they're working on. And I did not get that here. I did not get that here. That really is the difference.
Yeah. And honestly, I've felt that way for a long time. And maybe it's just me. I don't know. But even looking at something like Last Christmas, that is a movie where he is trying to play with formula trying to subvert has another crazy twist. I just
True.
don't think that works at all. The School for Good and Evil also attempting to do things that I just think fails miserably. So, like, I don't know if his tactics have changed, but the execution and deliverability has changed, at least for me.
I think he's trying too hard in the later half of his career here.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah, because there was like a movie like Spy, a movie like The Heat, while they were playing with genre, they weren't fully going for those respective genres that they were riffing on. There was still a bit of a balance there. It was kind of straddling that line between typical modern comedy while kind of flirting with the genre a little bit. And I think that made those films a bit more balanced. And I think he was maybe a bit more comfortable working with those movies. And clearly, maybe he's just trying to test that comfortability a little bit more, and it's not yielding good results. I'm with you on Last Christmas. That's a movie that I give props for being kind of bold and daring, and how the lyrics to a song kind of spoiled the movie, which is kind of hilarious. I give the movie credit for just that simple gimmick. I don't think the movie works in that execution, but I think the gimmick is at least intriguing. But maybe he's just trying too hard. Maybe that's all it is.
Yeah, perhaps that is the case. We'll see moving forward. He might have another film coming out later this year called The Housemaid, which stars Sydney Sweeney, Amanda Seyfried, and others. That is labeled as a psychological thriller. I don't know what that entails necessarily.
I don't know how a Paul Feig psychological thriller works, but okay.
We'll find out.
Sure, why not?
We'll find out. It's based on a novel from Frida McFadden, which I have not read, but we'll see. We'll find out.
Yeah.
So I do hope that, just very like scanning that very superficially, maybe that's something that could pivot for him. It does sound different than what he's done the last few years. So
sure.
I guess we'll find out. Yeah. But I do think he's on a spiral downward.
I think so too. I think so too. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention with another simple favor. There is a wonky Ennio Morricone needle drop in this movie. Absolutely wonky.
There's a lot of things wonky about that film.
But I don't know, just given us as film lovers, when the actual marriage scene is utilizing the music to Once Upon a Time in the West, it is just weird. It is so weird. I get that they're in Italy. I get the connection there, but it is still really strange. But I don't know. Like while it is strange, I kind of have to give it a little bit of credit for being a bit strange, because at least there it was attempting some type of personality that at least got me as a film lover noticing something. But it's pretty strange for sure.
My last final thought on the film, I've been pretty hard on it, but I do want to give it some credit because I do think they take advantage of the Italian landscape here. The cinematography, I think, is pretty good. All things considered, the costumes are lavish. So like the below the line craft is actually quite good here. And I do want to give them some recognition.
Especially the costume design is quite good.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, honestly, this would have worked wonderfully if it was just an outlet to perhaps showcase those costumes a little bit, the Italian landscape, and let Richard Linklater do his thing with these crazy
It's a vacation
characters.
movie. That's what this is. Yeah.
That's what it should have been. Less is more. Less is more. That's all I'm saying. All right. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, you can leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can email us insessionfilm@gmail.com as well. I do want to note we have another review out this week. It is Thunderbolts, the latest film from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That is available. You can go and give that one a listen. Had a really great time breaking that one down. Episode 635 is available as well. Brendan and I do a consensus ranking for the MCU post Endgame. So the 14 films that have come out in phase 4 and 5, we did a consensus ranking, him and I coming together, putting our list together to deliver that ranking. You can go and check that out. That was really fun. Had a great time with that. And honestly, it changed my own individual list, that conversation.
Yeah, it made me appreciate some films a little bit more, rethink some films a little bit more. After having that conversation, JD, I did actually go back and try rewatching some of the films from Phase 1, just because I was kind of in a bit of a nostalgic mode after that whole exercise. Captain America: The First Avenger is just so good. I just have to leave it at that. It is so good.
I've always been a fan of Phase 1. I've always championed it. I think it's really great. I would love for Marvel in some ways to get back to that. And I don't know how you do that given how large and vast the universe is though, but I don't know. Maybe that's what makes something like Thunderbolts and how isolated it is for the most part anyway. Maybe that's what makes it exciting. I don't know.
Yeah, let's hope Fantastic Four continues that trend, because then it almost seems like there's this like curve happening between Phase 1, then you get bigger with Phase 2, bigger with Phase 3, sort of a loppy, floppy effect with Phase 4, and then Phase 5 is whatever it is. But now things are kind of slowly getting back to mid-budget, it feels like. So maybe there's a bit of an adverse thing happening here, which might be pretty cool to see. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see. I am hopeful for Fantastic Four. The other thing too that came to mind, and I didn't really talk about this as thoroughly as I probably could have on either the Thunderbolts review or the main show this last week. In the review, I did talk about Sun Lux's score and how great it is. I think it is top tier Marvel. And that was exciting to me because, and we have had these conversations in recent months, that a lot of the scores in the MCU have been quite middling since Phase 4 kicked off. Phase 4 and Phase 5, from a score perspective, has just been so disappointing. There are obviously outliers there. There have been some great scores to come along, but I don't know. Like,
I'm trying to
thinking back at like for Phase 1, like that's one of my favorite things about Phase 1. Like the music in every single one of those films is memorable. I know them all extremely well. Extremely well. And I still listen to them all in some way, shape, or form, even today.
Even if they weren't being scored by either Alan Silvestri or Michael Giacchino. I feel like anytime they score a Marvel movie, you're at least going to get something memorable. But for a while, if it wasn't one of those two names, you were not going to get something memorable. But back in Phases 1 and 2, you get someone like Henry Jackman, and he was still able to deliver something pretty inspired. I actually think his score for The Winter Soldier in particular is one of the best scores in the entire MCU.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Yeah, he absolutely nailed it. I mean, Patrick Doyle's score for that first Thor is so remarkable. The score for that first Captain America,
Alan Silvestri once again,
so memorable. Yeah,
I'd say obviously Michael Giacchino working with the Spider-Man movies, so he delivers a decent, not even a decent, a very good score once again with No Way Home. I think out of all the films in Phases 4 and 5, not including Thunderbolts, obviously, maybe Eternals is the one that probably has.
Eternals is the other one. Eternals is memorable. Yeah, that one I do really like. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever has some good stuff in it. I don't know if it's as good as the first.
I don't think it is.
Black Panther film, but it has some good stuff. But generally, like especially with Phase 5, it's just a lot to be desired. A lot to be desired. And honestly, like
I don't even remember there being any music in those movies.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really like if I'm really just gonna, I think it's Spider-Man: No Way Home and it's Thunderbolts. and maybe that's it as far as like truly great scores from 4 and 5.
Yeah, maybe. I still like the score for Eternals. I do like that.
And Eternals. Eternals.
I don't know if I'd call it great. It's maybe not quite
but it
as
is
memorable. But
I do really like
it is certainly. I mean, it feels like a score. It feels cinematic.
Yeah.
That's more than I can say about most of the others.
But when we're talking about 14 films, it's those 3, and that's pretty much it on the music front. So I think that's partially why I responded to Sunlux's score for Thunderbolts, because I'm like, oh my god, finally. They finally invested in this, and it's really, really, really good.
The Guardians films kind of have that too. Even Guardians Volume 3 kind of has that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike the scores to those movies. I just don't think they're particularly.
Well, yeah, they're not as focused on creating a memorable theme. They're more focused on kind of creating a vibe to support the emotional backbone of those movies, and I think they're very functional.
And the soundtrack,
that's true. The soundtrack is so
important to those movies than the score.
Yeah,
I think maybe that's why ultimately.
Yeah, you end up remembering that as opposed to
exactly. And the soundtrack, to be fair, is great in those movies. Fantastic.
Oh, sure. So there is still musicality at work there.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. At any rate, this divulged into something I did not expect.
Well, it's more interesting to talk about that than Another Simple Favor.
I know. At any rate, I'm sure we'll have more Marvel stuff to talk about as we get closer to Fantastic Four in July. But with all that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Another Simple Favor. Not good.
Paul Feig. What else you got, man? What else you got?